Now, programming from the Illinois Channel, an independent, nonpartisan corporation formed to provide nonpartisan coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. For more information on the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.
Just ahead, State Senator Andy Manar holds a press conference to announce his endorsement of Democrat candidate for governor J.B. Pritzker. Later, Senator Manar and Mr. Pritzker take questions from the press. Then in 25 minutes, talk radio show host and former Republican gubernatorial candidate Dan Proft gives a speech at the City Club of Chicago titled "The State of Illinois Politics," in which he lays out how the state is headed for inevitable financial ruin unless state politicians begin to honestly discuss Illinois' finances with their constituents and take action. Following that, in 1 hour and 5 minutes, Republican House members Grant Worley, Mark Batnick, and Keith Wheeler hold a press conference to discuss their bill that would amend the State Officials and Employee Ethics Act in order to combat sexual harassment and other ethical issues in the office. And finally, in 1 hour and 20 minutes, State Representative David Harris is joined by members of the National Press Association as they announce a resolution asking for community members to help them find photos of the 58,000 Vietnam vets killed in service, as many of these photos and personal records had previously been destroyed in a St. Louis warehouse fire. That's all just ahead, after a brief word from one of our advisory council members.
Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Linda Brookhart, Executive Director of the State Universities Annuitants Association. Founded in 1971, the State Universities Annuitants Association is the only advocacy organization focusing solely on pension and health care benefits for the participants and beneficiaries within the state university's retirement system. We advocate for both active workers as well as retirees. The number of individuals are well over 200,000. As an association, we work hard to keep our members informed of possible changes in the law that may impact their pensions, their health care, and their general well-being. There is no other association working to keep individuals informed on issues that matter. This is the one reason we're also proud to support the work of the Illinois Channel. Its focus is to keep all Illinoisans informed of the issues that affect them, whether in state government or of significant changes in the private sector. The Illinois Channel's in-depth, unedited coverage of legislative events, policy discussions, interviews with lawmakers, university presidents, and business leaders keep you informed on the issues that affect your life and the future of Illinois. I'm Linda Brookhart with the State Universities Annuitants Association. I watch the Illinois Channel, and I hope you do too. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
Next, from Springfield, State Senator Andy Manar holds a press conference to announce his endorsement of Democrat candidate for governor J.B. Pritzker. Later, Senator Manar and Mr. Pritzker take questions from the press. This runs about 25 minutes.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Dr. Lett. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your patience. It's a busy day across the street. Had to get a few things done before I came over here for this occasion. Before I get to the task at hand today, I want to thank Dr. Lett for what he referenced, which was an invitation for me to meet with superintendents of schools from all over downstate Illinois on November 30th of 2012 was the date. We're coming up on 5 years to that date. But Dr. Lett demanded in that meeting, he literally demanded of me that I put all of my capacity into the issue of equitable school funding. He's been a face in the Capitol building, as many of you have seen in hearings and at press conferences, to advance this issue. He has a corner claimed in my office, and even though he's retired today, you can occupy that corner not because you're being punished, but because it's your corner in my office anytime, David. So thank you for what you've done over the years. So I'm excited to be here this morning for a very simple reason. Illinois needs a new direction. The people of the 48th Senate District need a new direction, and downstate Illinois needs a new direction. And right now, more than ever, Illinois needs a steady hand at the wheel, someone that can reform state government and build the trust and leadership that are required to make state government work for working people that I represent, working people that are standing here in this room with us right now. And I believe that J.B. Pritzker is the right man for this job for the state of Illinois, and I enthusiastically endorse his candidacy for governor. Let me tell you why. I got a couple of reasons that I want to articulate today as to why I've made this decision, because it's not a decision that I made lightly. I met JB well over a year ago, and I've gotten to know him quite well. He's been to my district many times, many times, even before he was an announced candidate for the office. Those things I recognize up front. But specifically, I know that JB's committed to building the downstate economy in places that have been forgotten by Bruce Rauner, that I would argue were forgotten by Bruce Rauner the day after he was elected governor. Bruce Rauner pays nothing but lip service to middle-class families living in downstate Illinois that I represent, while his economic policies that he's still promoting today, 3 years later, are punishing to their pocketbooks. Bruce Rauner takes downstate voters for granted, as evidenced by his attire. I can't make it any more plain and simple than that. J.B. Pritzker will never take downstate voters for granted. I know that he's committed to creating jobs in small towns and in rural counties and in urban neighborhoods that I represent here in Springfield and also in Decatur. I watched J.B. in Gillespie one afternoon at a local establishment, a very small local establishment where we had well over 100 people packed in a room, and I watched JB interact with the constituents that I have the privilege of representing. And I watched him sit with a young man who I know has been struggling to find steady work to support his family. And he listened to that young man. And I know that when JB's elected governor, he's going to think of that young man when he makes his decisions as the chief executive. I've heard him listen to workers in Decatur. I've heard him sit and listen to union workers here in Springfield. And I've heard him commit to protect their right to collectively bargain. It's amazing that we are 3 years into the Rauner administration and we are still having to fight the right to work issue. That won't happen in a Pritzker administration. He's committed to building the downstate economy, and he is also the only candidate that has laid out specific plans to do so. He should be commended for that. And speaking of building, I know that JB is going to help build the Democratic Party downstate. That's not been talked about much in this race, but I want to mention it today. Why is that important? Because I want to support a statewide candidate who runs in every county, 102, and he's doing that in a very big way. That's important to me because I see a campaign strategy that will, I believe, then reflect his strategy as governor, not ignoring parts of the state that maybe don't have as much votes to cast as other parts of the state. So when I see a statewide candidate wage a statewide election campaign, I know that that approach will translate into a governing role, and I know JB will do that. I used the word listen a couple of times. Dr. Letts used the word listen. The one thing that I'm most impressed about with J.B. Pritzker is that he is a listener first. He is a listener first. And for me, that would be a welcome change in the governor's office. Someone that actually listens, someone that seeks to understand other people, someone that wakes up every single day, not to pick fights, but to set into motion positive change and build consensus. Someone that can bring Illinois together, not divide Illinois on the lines that typically divide us in the state, that prevent us from getting things done. That's what we need in our state, and I know JB is going to be that leader. And finally, and this is why Dr. Letts here, the reason I'm endorsing JB today is because his position on public education. I know that's not going to shock anybody in this room, but this is the issue that he and I have discussed the most over the course of many months, and I will tell you that his commitment to public education is second to none. First and foremost in the least funded schools in the state of Illinois. Now, I'm going to cut to the chase here. I've tested him on this. I've tested him on this issue, not with pen and paper, but with my questions and with my words. I've pushed him hard in our conversations so that I can better understand his position, because we didn't fight for lasting reform for 5 years. I didn't put 5 years of effort into school funding reform only to have a governor wipe it away a year or 2 or 3 or 4 from now. And I can tell you that JB has a deeply held belief about the importance for public education, that public education and attacking poverty through public education is the only route to fix lasting problems in the state. We share many common interests, but this is perhaps the most important. And that's one reason why I'm going to help to get him elected to the governor's office. JB will be a partner in education funding. He will be someone who isn't going to fight me on this issue, but he's going to fight with me to make sure that the gains that we have made can be built upon and that we can do more, not less, over time. So we have many challenges in the state today. And JB and I are ready to unite Illinois and finally move our state forward to solve problems for the people of the 48th Senate District, for downstate Illinois, and for the entire state. JB Pritzker is going to fix this state when he is elected. And I'm going to help him win this election and get that important job done. I want to thank everybody for attending this brief press conference today. I want to recognize President of the AFL-CIO, Michael Kerrigan, for being with us today. He's not only wearing the hat of heading up labor in the state, he also wears the important hat of being a constituent of Senator Andy Manar, which I deeply appreciate his guidance over the years. I want to also recognize the other labor leaders that are here with us, and many chairs and leaders in the Democratic Party that are standing with us this morning. I'd like to introduce, in my opinion, the man that should be the next governor of the state of Illinois, JB Pritzker.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you very much. Thank you. Wow. Well, my goodness. And Dr. Lett, thank you so much for being here, for helping us begin the day. And thanks to all of you for being here and the leaders that have joined me along with Senator Manar. Good morning to everybody. I want to begin by saying that in a time of great instability in this state, with a governor who lurches us from crisis to crisis, I think we've all been able to rest just a little bit easier, knowing that Senator Andy Manar is standing up for working families in his district and all around the state by virtue of his representation here in Springfield. Andy Manar doesn't run away from challenges. In fact, he runs toward them. He's relentless and he's unyielding when it comes to doing what's right for his constituents and for the state of Illinois. He takes the impossible and he makes it possible through his sheer determination and will. Thoughtful, dogged, genuine, decent, these are some of the words that even Republicans in the Capitol say about Andy Manar. I am so proud, genuinely proud, to have Andy's support and endorsement in this race. Here's just one reason why. Andy got to tell a story. I want to tell a story. When Andy first got to the state Senate, he took on this battle that, frankly, no one wanted to wage, and I think this is the point you were making, Dr. Lett. It labeled the most inequitably funded schools in the nation. Illinois' school funding formula was broken, and it had been that way for many decades. But no one in the General Assembly was willing to stick their neck out on such a complex issue and undertaking. No one except Andy Manar. With a singular focus for years now on doing what's right for the children of Illinois and all across the state, not just in his own district. Andy educated, one by one, Senate and House members and governors about why this is such an important issue. And he listened. You talked about listening and how important that is, but he listened to their concerns and took them into account. On such an important issue, he responded by working even harder to get it done. He became known across the state as the man with the education reform mission. Andy Manar took on the seemingly impossible fight, and he won. He got a new fair school funding formula passed. It's a huge win, and I really mean a huge win for children, and it'll improve the lives of families all across the state. I'm running for governor because it's time that Andy Manar had a partner, a real partner, on education and so many other issues here in Springfield. Together, we can do a whole lot more to make sure that every child in Illinois gets a quality education, the quality education that he or she deserves. Improving the school funding formula was a historic step forward, but our work can't stop with the school funding formula. We need to start with the earliest years of life, with quality early childhood education and quality child care. When I'm governor, I'm going to reverse the damage that Rauner has done to the Child Care Assistance Program and aggressively put us on a path toward universal preschool in Illinois. In K-12 education, Illinois currently ranks nearly last in state funding for education. I mean, nearly last. What we need is a progressive income tax so that we can pay for our schools and lower property taxes all across Illinois. A progressive income tax means that if you're in the middle class or striving to get to the middle class, I want to lower your taxes. Finally, the best economic resources that we have in our state are our people. Jobs get created where the best talent lives. It's time to invest in the people of Illinois. And that means quality education up and down from the beginning of life all the way through. It's time to build a better future for our state and for our economy. Our higher education institutions should be hubs of lifelong learning, and I really mean lifelong learning, and skills development. Our students should be able to go to college without getting themselves strapped with debt for the rest of their lives. And we need to bring back vocational training into our high schools and apprenticeships too. And I don't just mean union apprenticeships. I mean apprenticeships across the board in private companies too that aren't unionized. We need apprenticeships. We need vocational training. Young men and women who decide not to go to college should be able to graduate and build careers and have a middle-class life. I know that this will be a really tough fight in this election cycle, but I'm proud to be standing here with someone who knows a thing or two about tough fights. Andy Manar's school funding victory was called, quote, nothing short of a miracle. In fact, it was so impressive that Bruce Rauner stole it, and he lied about it, and he put it in a TV ad. But we know the truth. The truth is Bruce Rauner stuck a backdoor school voucher program into the school funding legislation. He bashed the legislation repeatedly, but he's now decided that he's going to try to convince Illinois voters it was his victory. Let me be clear. It was Andy Manar who got school funding reform done in spite of Bruce Rauner, not because of him. Now, let's remind ourselves of some history about our failed governor. He held school funding hostage. He attacked our unions and working families by trying to lower wages in this state. He caused a budget crisis for 2 years and 6 days, and he decimated our safety net of services that are meant to strengthen families in Illinois. He has one of the worst records of job growth in the Midwest. He has tried to divide our state by pitting communities against each other. Bruce Rauner has been a failure and it's time for him to go. Andy Manar and I are trying to unite Illinois and move our state forward. It's time to get Illinois off the cliff and begin looking to the future. We need a balanced budget that puts working people first, that lives up to our responsibilities to our seniors, and helps children and students build better lives. We need to support the human services agencies that strengthen Illinois families. And for goodness sakes, we need to create jobs. We need to create jobs in this state. I want Illinois to be a place where innovation happens, where things get built, and where families and communities thrive. I know that we can get there. Andy knows that we can get there. My campaign is pounding the pavement and organizing to win in every county. Like in Virginia, like in New Jersey last night, we're going to elect Democrats at every level in Illinois, up and down the ticket. We need to send Andy Manar back to Springfield so he can continue the fight for our shared democratic values. It's time to put Springfield back on the side of working families. And I am so proud to have the support of one of the great champions of working families, Andy Manar, standing with me. Thank you, Andy, for everything. Thank you all for coming today. Thanks to the leaders who are here. I cannot wait to get at this. We are going to beat Bruce Rauner and put Illinois back on track. Thank you. Thank you.
JB, what role does Senator Manar have in the Pritzker administration?
Well, listen, the administration is going to work with, sorry. Thank you for the question. The administration is going to work with the legislature to actually get things done. We're going to need partners in the legislature, like Andy Manar, leaders, honestly, because, boy, do we have work to do. We haven't put a plan out specifically on the rates themselves, but it's clear to me that people who can most afford it should pay a higher rate than people who are striving to get to the middle class. And the whole idea here is to protect the middle class and those striving to get there.
Tax, if I might just follow up on that. People are going to argue if you have a flat tax as we do, the lower income people pay less. The higher income people pay more. What would be your response to?
Well, remember that $100 to someone who makes $20,000 a year is so much more important than $100 to someone who makes $500,000 a year. That the dollars that you pay shouldn't be looked at as much as the rate that you pay. We have priorities in this state that we need to stand up for. Healthcare, education, job creation, those are all things that we need to do that are going to require us to prioritize, put them at the top of the list, and make sure that we're paying our bills, which, by the way, is something that this governor hasn't been willing to do. So when you sit down and build a budget, there are three components to that. There are expenses, there's revenue, and then there's growth. And we've had no growth, and we've put all of the revenue challenge on the backs of middle-class families. That really is where it resides, middle-class families and those striving to get there. That's not the way it should be. And by the way, a flat tax has been done away with in most states in the United States. It's time for us to do away with that antiquated system so we have a progressive tax.
Questions for both of you. A federal court has said that local right-to-work ordinances are not consistent with the National Labor Relations Act. Basically, states can pass these laws, but not local government. So was yesterday a symbolic defeat for the right-to-work ordinance? So how worried are you that local municipalities will, in fact, set up these right-to-work zones, or not at all, given what the federal court has ruled? And also undone, how disappointed would you guys be if the House did not act on strengthening the dealer restrictions and guidelines?
Let's start with the latter question. To me, anyway, I think the bump stock question is not a question. I mean, we need to have legislation. If we don't get it, it's something that'll be part of a campaign. We certainly want to make sure that we get it, and if we don't have a legislature that's doing it now, we'll get a legislature by January of 2019 that's okay. I get it, but I'm just pointing out that you asked about gun legislation in general. I'm talking about bump stock, so I don't disagree with that. I mean, I'm in favor of that bill, by the way. So I'll be disappointed, and I'll work toward a gun dealer licensing bill. But as to whether it'll pass or not, I can't tell you. And sorry, the first part of your question was about right to work. Yeah, right to work. I mean, you know where I stand on this. I'm absolutely foursquare opposed to right to work. Right to work really means right to work for less. It's not right. So there's everything about that name that's wrong. And the bill that didn't get overridden, to me anyway, we're gonna fight hard to protect our state from these right to work laws. Again, if you elect a Democratic governor, if you elect me, we're not going to have any of those laws. We're not going to have the competition from one community to another community where they're competing for the lowest wages. That seems like a horrible idea to me. We do not need in this state to compete or have a governor who's in favor of competing for the lowest wages. The governors should be waking up every day thinking about how to raise wages for people in the state, how to raise workplace safety for people in the state, not lower it.
Can I add one? I want to add something to that. So this debate, I mentioned this in my remarks, this debate about right to work, it needs to go away. The hypocrisy that's playing out on television right now with that ad from Bruce Rauner and surrounding governors in the Midwest. There's sister organizations to the organizations in Illinois that are pushing right to work in Missouri, claiming that Missouri needs right to work because their economy is lagging behind, that they're 47th in the nation in economic growth. At the same time, Governor Greitens is on television in Illinois saying that their economy is just humming along. They can't have it both ways. JB's right. This is a race to the bottom. We know that when this is adopted, wages decline, not just of union members, but of non-union members, which we need to talk about more because there's an impact on the workforce that is the non-union sector of the workforce. This is a bad deal. This is a bad deal. This puts money in people's pockets that already have a lot of money. And we need to grow the economy. And the way to do that in the 48th District is by strengthening unions and the middle class, not by weakening them.
Next, from Chicago, talk radio show host and former Republican gubernatorial candidate Dan Proft gives a speech at the City Club of Chicago titled "The State of Illinois Politics," in which he lays out how the state is headed for inevitable financial ruin unless state politicians begin to honestly discuss Illinois' finances with their constituents and take action. This runs about 40 minutes.
I appreciate Chris leaving me some time for my remarks. It's a pleasure to be at the City Club. It's an honor, really, and since my first invite may be my last, depending on how what I have to say is received, I just wanted to see if I could be remembered for at least getting unanimity on one thing I had to offer, and that is to congratulate Jay Doherty and his wife Colleen, who were honored over the weekend by the Best Buddies organization, which is another organization, one of many great ones that we have in Chicago, that serves the developmental and intellectual disability community. And as Chris referenced, I have the honor of serving on the board of Envision Unlimited. I'm going to be speaking in my remarks to the issue of how we treat persons with disabilities in this state. Secondly, I understand that it was the City Club where Donald Trump gave his first speech after his announcement of his candidacy for presidency of the United States. So my hope, of course, is that this provides a similar springboard for me, and that would be, of course, for a reality TV show, which is what I really want. For my stem winder today, I was going to distill Illinois' kleptocratic political culture and explain all the Ponzi schemes that prop it up for now. I was going to kind of try and diagnose this folie douce that we suffer from in Illinois. Actually, it's more like folie 13 million, but I don't know what 13 million is in French. The shared psychosis that we have, this political culture that we tolerate. But it feels to me, as I'm writing this and kind of pulling out all of the data with respect to the pension systems and the Medicaid system and K through 12 education and so on. I was starting to get bored myself. It seems to me it'd just be selling past the close to go through all that in a state where 85% of Illinois families say we're on the wrong track, and half want to leave. Perhaps the worst indictment of Illinois. So this is not going to be completely another jury speech delineating the statistics that punctuate Chicago's place as the worst governed major city in America and the worst governed state in United States history. It's not going to be that. It's clear that Chicagoans and many Illinoisans are unmoved by data, so why belabor it? So if you think we can have public sector employees pay $140,000 into the pension system and get guaranteed $2 million back, and prop up that thing election cycle after election cycle by borrowing in the bond markets at Sopranos rates, then this speech is for you. If you think $250 billion in debt, featuring the largest unfunded pension liabilities in the country with another $16 billion in unpaid bills, all while Illinoisans pay the highest state and local tax burden in the nation, if you think what I'm describing is a revenue problem, not a spending problem, then this speech is for you. If you think we don't spend enough money on K through 12 education in Illinois, despite a 48% overall increase in spend and a 59% increase in state spend over the past 20 years, while K through 12 enrollment has grown only 5% during that same time period, then this speech is for you. By the way, the numbers for CPS, 20% real dollar increase over the same 20 years, 5% decline in enrollment. If you think the problem with higher ed is the lack of state funding, despite the fact that Illinois provides twice the national average in per pupil higher ed support to its state colleges and universities, who then turn around and charge families 25 to 50% higher than their conference peers in neighboring states. If you think that's the problem, the lack of funding, then this speech is for you. If you think 32 years of the last 34 of Mike Madigan's speakership is not a sufficient probationary period, let's give the guy a chance to do something. Or 100 years of Democrat dominance of the city of Chicago, then this speech is for you. And by the way, that is hardly a defense of the Illinois Republican Party. The reason I would argue that Madigan has enjoyed his run is not because he's genius, it's because the Illinois Republican Party is feckless and weak and cowardly and surrenders as its first offering on most issues. And if you think stories reported and the sacred cows protected by a Chicago Springfield press corps that votes 90% Democrat for 30 years wouldn't be any different if the same Chicago Springfield press corps was comprised of 90% Republican primary voters, then this speech is for you. The math is only an opinion crowd is my mission field. Those who care only about inputs to the exclusion of outputs are who I want to reach. If you nod your head when the political ruling class gives you their three-pronged defense for everything that's wrong with Illinois, it's not as bad as you think. Plenty of blame to go around, and we're working on it. If you nod your head at that, say that makes sense, then we need to talk. If you enjoy engorging yourself on boilerplate kindergarten talk from the rushing nesting doll that is Ronner Rom, pop open Ronner and out pirouettes Rom, same person, then I want your attention. So my challenge is simple, actually. The title of this speech is The State of Illinois Politics. What's politics about? People. So the real question is the state of we the people here in Illinois. What is that state? And I boil it down to two simple questions. Are we reasonable? Are we reasonable people in Illinois? And are we kind people? Those two questions actually turn out to be connected. It's really one question. Because as Chesterton observed, those who have given in to unreason are ready for unkindness. And I would suggest that we have become a particularly unkind state, a barbaric state, to put a fine point on it. And I want to share 3 examples of things that we could do that are about the people of this state, not it's about people only as the mechanism for a discussion of statistics. So let's return to the issue of persons with developmental disabilities in Illinois. So every politician in both parties says, I'm going to Springfield, I'm going to city council, I'm going to county board to make sure that people who need state services, local services through no fault of their own, are provided those state services because that's what a civilized society does. And everybody agrees. And we have, as I mentioned, $250 billion in debt and the highest state and local tax burden in the nation. So how is it that up until recently we were 51st out of 50 behind even the District of Columbia in providing services to persons with developmental and intellectual disabilities? Of the $16 billion in unpaid bills, many of those unpaid bills or unpaid monies are owed to social service providers. So how is that? Square that circle for me. On the one hand, this is what I'm going to government to do. On the other hand, we're the worst in the nation in doing it. How is that possible? You see the incongruence there? So there's something that explains it quite nicely. The political ruling class in the state is lying to us. They're lying. They are not doing with our monies what we would like them to do and what they say they intend to do. Plain and simple, black and white. It is unimpeachable. 24,000 Illinois families are on the PUNS list. PUNS list, for those not familiar with the sector, prioritization of urgency of needs for services. Prioritization of urgency for need of services. 24,000 people long. You are having families whose child with a developmental or intellectual disability actually age out of eligibility for services while waiting for those services. That's a fact. And we talk a lot in this state about businesses leaving for more hospitable business climates, and that's happening, of course. People leaving for a lower cost of, a better quality of life at a lower cost of living, that's happening, of course. Well, people are leaving this state to go to states that keep their promises to families who have a family member with a developmental disability. That's a fact, too. And I know families, many families, who've done that, to Wisconsin, to Indiana. We've taken the unreasonable position that we can make promises that go unfulfilled, and we will not hold our elected officials accountable for those cheap promises, those lies, and so we become unkind. The things that you say you want to see happen are not happening in unbelievable numbers. What happened with the Obamacare Medicaid expansion? That was an opportunity for more people to access Medicaid who need it, right? Well, what's actually happened? You run a Medicaid system you cannot finance, which was the case prior to Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. So Medicaid providers who aren't getting paid stop accepting Medicaid patients. So the very people that were intended to be served by the Medicaid program 45, 50 years ago when it was conceived, pregnant women, indigent children, the developmentally disabled, they actually see their access to quality service worsen because we run a program we can't finance. So where's the honor in that? Maybe one or more of the parties and the candidates and the legislators who make these promises, and some are genuine about it and some put in the fight, but it's few. Maybe instead of only always talking about being #1 in the country in job creation or capital formation or business location, we should be having a conversation about us keeping our promises to ourselves and to families who are our neighbors who have children with challenges. Maybe we should focus on being #1 in the country and providing services that are a mirror of our humanity. Because I don't like what I see when I look in the mirror in this state. Second issue. Keeping families together. Keeping families together. We're supposed to respect people who decide to build a life for themselves and their families in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in this state. Are we doing that? Obviously, some of the statistics that I said I'm not going to talk about, it's kind of that little trick saying I'm not going to call my opponent a horse thief, right? And then you've already called him a horse thief. So that was my little trick in case you didn't pick up on it. But are we really doing that? Are we keeping families together? Obviously, with the cost of higher education in this state relative to conference peers for in-state tuition for families in state, we're driving our best and brightest out of the state at record numbers. In fact, only New Jersey exports more of its college-bound high school seniors than Illinois. So that's not good. By the way, also leading the exodus out of Illinois, postgraduate exodus out of Illinois, since we're leading the nation in that too last 6 years. It's not seniors, it's not retirees who want to go to Arizona or Florida. Millennials. Millennials as a cohort is leading the exodus from this state. Brain drain. It's a problem. The other problem is that the biggest investment middle-income families make in their lives, their homes, it is not possible to get a rate of return, to get any real return on your home, because property taxes are confiscatory in this state. Highest property taxes in the nation. This is not just a financial problem, it's a moral problem. You know where the highest property tax rate as a percentage of home value is in Cook County? So Harvey, Robbins, very warm, people who know the property tax system. Fort Heights. Fort Heights. One of the poorest communities in Cook County, one of the poorest communities in Illinois, one of the poorest communities in the country. The average property tax rate in the country as a percentage of home value is 0.9%. In Illinois, it's 2.5 times that, it's 2.3%. In Fort Heights, 10%. Precluding home ownership. Precluding home ownership. You cannot even get on that first rung up the ladder. And for middle-income families, Aurora, Illinois versus Aurora, Colorado. Both working-class, middle-income type communities. 2 homes sold at the end of March, one in Aurora, Illinois, one in Aurora, Colorado. 5-bedroom house in Aurora, Illinois, sold for about $250,000, tax bill $8,400. 4-bedroom home sold in Aurora, Colorado for $250,000, tax bill $840. This state is becoming a home equity desert, and it's forcing people, particularly those on fixed incomes, to leave. It is breaking up families. It's forcing, if your kids do stay and go to school here, it's forcing mom and dad to leave because they can't afford it. We have an idea that I've proposed, and we're pushing an advisory ballot question to try and get on the 2018 ballot to change the way we do property taxation in Illinois because, as I said, it's immoral. And it's also destructive. And that would be to adopt the Indiana property tax system. You know, sometimes the great thing is, if you pick your head up and you look around to see what everybody else is doing, you might find somebody that's doing something successfully that you want to replicate rather than just perpetuating the failure that you've got tunnel vision. So Indiana's system, 1% hard cap on property taxes as a percentage of home value, residential, and then 2% farmland, 3% commercial. 1% hard cap. And that would reduce the median home owners' property tax bill, obviously, by 60% overnight. I mean, in the suburbs, in the collar counties, you're talking about numbers that are between 3.5% to 5.5% of home value. It would restore home equity. Here's the other thing that's nice about that. Oh, by the way, I should mention, too, Indiana, and this is, check this out, I swear this is true. In Indiana, because I know what the concerns are going to be about reducing property taxes, but check this out. And some of you have probably been there, so maybe you could back me up on this. In Indiana, they have schools. They have police departments. They have fire departments. They have local units of government. I swear to God that's true. Right. Yeah, it's true. And of course, and one of the arguments I get to this is, well, also in Indiana, they have this unique thing where local counties can impose an income tax. Municipalities can impose. Okay, fine. Your overall tax burden is still a fraction in Indiana, no matter where you go, as compared to Cook and the Collars. So that's the point, isn't it? The net plus the possibility of the return, a return on the largest investment you're going to make in your lives. Most people. And here's the thing, it also has a daisy chain effect to do what is required on the political class, put handcuffs on people. I mean, not the handcuffs we're used to, with people being taken away. I'm talking about spending restraint. It forces a discipline at the local level that then can be leveraged to force a discipline at the state level. So, for example, if you can't destroy people's home equity to pay for ever-escalating administrative salaries and an expansion of your local school district, then the state has to live up to its constitutional responsibility to be the primary funder of K-12 education, which would require it to get out of all kinds of businesses that it's in that it's shown no proficiency in operating. And that would be a good thing. Put handcuffs on local officials by capping property taxes as a percentage of home value, and force the state to abide its constitutional responsibility to be the primary funder of K-12 education. It also has an equalizing effect. So it's kind of a nice little daisy chain development if we would pursue this. By the way, that must be why it's working so well for Indiana. I mentioned the school spend numbers and how they've gone up at a 45-degree angle while performance has been flat, but I didn't mention the performance, but we just heard it this week. Fewer than 40% of K-12 third and eighth graders pass the math or reading PARCC tests. So it's not just a Chicago problem. Chicago is actually under 25%. So it definitely includes a Chicago problem. That is the biggest problem, but it's not limited to Chicago. The last thing, and this is an idea that should give us hope because it actually came to pass. It is the greatest paradigm shift, the greatest system change idea that has taken effect into law in my 25 years in Illinois politics. Now, that's admittedly a low bar, but it's an important development nonetheless. And that is the tax credit scholarships that were passed and signed into law. Bipartisan support. I know that's very popular. As long as something's bipartisan, it must be good. Usually not. In this case, yes. Tax credit scholarships that provide people the opportunity to fund $500 million worth of scholarships over the next 5 years for low to middle income children to have the same educational opportunities as the wealthy and the politically connected in this city and this state. That is a game changer. And by the way, one of the people who is most responsible for this is in the audience, Miles Mendoza, right there. We should give him a round of applause. In Florida, where they've had this same setup, the nuances are a bit different, but it's the same idea, where they've had this in place for the last 15 plus years. 100,000 kids are now in the program. You know what the median household income is of the kids getting scholarships to these schools? 27 grand. And there's a study that just came out, because we had one of the authors of the study on my radio show, showing how well those kids, I think it's 80% are minority, black and Latino, are doing as compared to their public school counterparts. This is not an attack on public schools. I know everything is competition or talk about anything financial or anybody should go to any other school. This is an attack on public education and you want to eliminate public education and all the other ridiculous hysteria from teachers' unions, for goodness sakes. It's none of that. It's to say K through 12 should be child-centered and outcome-based. And it's to say that people shouldn't be discriminated against based on their household income and their address, which is what we have been doing in Illinois and Chicago up until the point of this deal for tax credit scholarships. Up to $13,200 per kid per year. $26,400, you double that if your kid is special needs or gifted. It's a game changer. Introducing competition into a system that is moribund, that is not performing, as we would want it to perform at exorbitant prices as per the spend versus park tests. So those are two areas that are aspirational, property taxes and how we serve persons with developmental and intellectual disabilities, and one that's actually come to pass on a landscape few would ever think it could come to pass in a state government dominated by public sector unions and Chicago Democrats, frankly. But it happened. It happened because all of the problems that afflict Chicago and Illinois are man-made problems. They didn't arrive here on spaceships. We did this to ourselves. So they're man-made solutions, or at least improvements that can be made. The question seems to me to be one of courage. C.S. Lewis, I like to bookend my speeches with Christian apologists. I started with Chesterton, I'll end with C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis said, courage is the formation of every virtue at its testing point. In other words, if you don't have courage, it's impossible to possess any of the other virtues you say you have, because when you are pressed, you will fold. So do we have the courage to be reasonable? Or are we going to tolerate unreasonable systems that produce unkindness from us? Necessarily, it requires unkindness to enforce unreason. Do we have the courage to be reasonable? Do we have the courage to be kind? Are we going to say no more to the barbarism that has taken hold in our city and state? That, to me, is the state of Illinois politics, because it's the state of the people, and the question each one of you has to ask yourselves and pay it forward in this cycle and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks all for your questions. Please send them up. We've got people taking them, and we'd love to get them. This comes right out of your remarks from Jasmine Hauser, pre-submitted. It's claimed, Dan, that people are moving out of Illinois in record numbers. Is it not also the case that for every property tax owner who leaves, someone else moves in? Therefore, isn't it a zero net out migration? Please clarify.
Well, I mean, the net is we're losing population. I mean, Chicago has its lowest population since 1920. So, I mean, that says something about where we are at as a population. The whole kind of out-migration thing, I just want to put it in human terms rather than kind of getting into the fact that people leaving are making $20,000 more than the people coming in, and that's. Do you know how big a decision it is for somebody to move? To move for economic reasons? So my family's here, my friends are here, I generally like the kids' school, I like all the cultural offerings that Chicago has to offer, I like the clubs I'm in, and all, but we can't make it make sense to be here. That is a momentous decision. The fact that so many people are making it should be a real wake-up call. I mean, I know, people come and go and all that, but, the data bears out just how deleterious it is on our economy. I mean, you're talking about over the last 15 years, basically, we've lost $30 billion in GDP by people from people who've left. But it's even more than the money. Is we're losing good people. We're losing, as I mentioned before, our smartest people because they can't make it make sense to be here. And those are huge decisions, and it's a huge, huge indictment of our politics and our political culture and our political leadership in both parties.
Kathy Carmody, is Kathy here? I think Kathy is. Oh, there she is. So good. She's with the Institute of Public Policy for People with Disabilities and a member of the City Club. What can Illinois do, this comes right out of your remarks, to improve our poor national status on social service indicators? Is there a will or an interest in Springfield to make these improvements?
Well, I mean, the answer as we stand here today is no, there isn't. That could change. I mean, again, it put pressure. I mean, I understand that everybody's all giddy over Amazon HQ2, and that's all we can talk about. And that's great if it comes to Chicago or if it comes to Illinois. It's not going to, but if it does. But maybe making, how we treat those who need help among us as a priority when you talk to your state legislators or when you have these meetings of opinion leaders in the community. I mean, make this a priority, and it forces legislators to make it a priority. Here's the thing about the General Assembly, with a few exceptions, some of whom are in this room. The bad news is they're cowards. They join the parade after it's been formed. The good news is they're cowards. They can be pressured into doing things they otherwise wouldn't ordinarily do out of their own character or of their own volition. Milton Friedman said, the trick of politics is getting the wrong people to do the right thing. And the way you do that is by constantly, relentlessly applying pressure on issues that are important to you. So if we say these issues are important to you, then we should be applying pressure in that direction.
Fred O'Connor, City Club member, asks, what is the best realistic hope for school choice and educational improvement in Illinois?
Well, it's maxing out. We have $500 million ceiling over the next 5 years. It's making sure that we raise the $500 million and distribute those monies to kids that would then be availed of better educational opportunities. And then 5 years from now, when we're on the precipice of its sunsetting, you have a constituency built in, and we continue to apply pressure throughout that 5-year period to those same legislators I just talked about applying pressure to on the issue of serving the developmental disability community, so that this is extended into the future. I mean, again, the Florida case study, since this is a real-world case study, is so important. That program started out as a $25 million program. Now it's $600 million. And this is the biggest tax credit scholarship program of its kind, particularly at the outset, in our nation's history. This is a huge, huge thing that's been underreported for all kinds of obvious reasons. People don't want to take credit for it because Karen Lewis is going to get mad at them and all that jazz. But this is a huge development, paradigm changer. And we should be shouting it from the rooftops, and we should be encouraging families that have kids who could benefit from them, the scholarships to benefit from them, and people that have the resources to donate, so we take full advantage of this opportunity that a broad cross-section of coalition partners has created for us.
Dan, for folks watching and for folks here who don't follow it as closely, could you just go through the mechanics between individuals and the benefit and where the money goes and how it gets to benefit the kids?
Well, so right now the process is setting up scholarship granting organizations, which are non-for-profits that will distribute the scholarships. This is what Florida has. So a lot of what Miles and his people are doing is modeled after Florida, which is good because it's been wildly successful. So again, replicating success. And so there'll be a period in the not too distant future where monies are raised and infrastructure is built where kids can start applying for scholarships for as soon as the next school year 2018. And then you'll have decisions made by these scholarship granting organizations consistent with the criteria that was established in the law. And again, remember the dollars. And also keep this in mind regarding the dollars, how we came to these numbers, because it speaks to how we fund K through 12 education in the state, which is we fund it well. $13,200 per individual, double it if it's special needs or gifted, 26.4. 13.2, you know where that came from? Median per pupil spend K through 12 education in Illinois. Big number. It's a lot bigger number than Bennett spent educating me, I'll tell you that.
Paul Metzger, member of the City Club, what specific significant cuts would you propose for the Illinois budget?
So there's a couple things. One is, if you're not talking about completely rethinking and reintroducing the 5 state pension systems, the Medicaid program, which is actually the largest line item in the General Revenue Fund, K through 12 education, and transportation infrastructure. If you're not completely rethinking how we do all of those things, how we finance them, the obligations they impose, then you're not serious about trying to climb our way out of $250 billion in debt or chart Illinois in a different course. So it's not just about cutting. Would I eliminate the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, or whatever Orwellian name it has right now, which is a pass-through for crony capitalism, corporate welfare? Yeah, gone. There's $1 billion. I mean, I could do this all day, but the problem is the Medicaid program, that $18 billion annual program that's moving from 1 in 5 Illinoisans eligible to 1 in 3. And of course, what politicians do, use entitlement programs to buy political fealty rather than to actually serve the constituency that was originally envisioned to be served. You have to rethink the state's Medicaid program. You have to reduce, you should roll back the Obamacare Medicaid expansion. You should. We couldn't afford it when it was 1 in 5. Now you're going to 1 in 3. The Kaiser Foundation, also redetermination of Medicaid rolls. If you're not eligible under the original strictures of the program, then you're off. I'm sorry, but if you live in Wisconsin, you can't be on Illinois' Medicaid program. If you're in this country illegally, I'm sorry, we will provide emergency services because that's what a humane society does, but you cannot access the state's Medicaid program. The Kaiser Foundation looked at this, and a redetermination of the state's Medicaid rolls would say between $500 and $750 million annually, just to give you another example. Obviously, the 5-state pension systems, huge, huge sucking chest wound. I mean, you cannot make these not, look, this is the thing, the pension system. The thing about the public sector unions, SEIU, AFSCME, and the teachers. The thing about them, tell your rank and file friends in AFSCME and SEIU and the teachers, I don't dislike them. In point of fact, people like me who are advocating for prospective pension reform, for benefits not yet earned, for work not yet performed, we're trying to save your pensions. Trying to save your pensions. We want you to get what was promised to you, even if it was a bad promise because people relied on those promises, so it's the moral thing to do. But when you say, I have this provision in the state constitution, and Ann Burke said this is what it means, and so I'm going to put my fingers in my ears and not listen to anything you have to say. Fine. But when these pension funds capsize, and they are going to capsize, then you don't come crying to us. You know, people that we're trying to have a conversation that brings you on board so you chart a solution. Talk to Jim Sweeney at Operating Engineers 150. Talk to the trade unions about what they've had to do to maintain health insurance benefits and pension solvency from the Great Recession to present. How many times they had to reduce the multiplier. The conversations Jim Sweeney had to have with 7,000 operating engineers at a hall in Rosemont. You think those are easy conversations? 7,000 operating engineers? I don't think so. But at least he had the courage to do it because he had a fiduciary responsibility to his men and those families, and he did it. What we have is people who make empty promises because they know they'll be gone when it's time to pay the bills. And let me tell you something. I said this, I know I saw Dean Angelo in the crowd before. I said this, I got all kinds of heat from the Chicago FOP. We looked at the last 12 years of the FOPs, the police pension funds, Chicago police pension funds, filing with the Department of Insurance. I'm not making it these numbers. These are the numbers they file with the Department of Insurance. Doing a little back-of-the-envelope math, which is all you really need to do, the Chicago Police Pension Fund, which is less than 25% funded, will be unable to pay out current beneficiaries by the end of 2021. And the Chicago firefighters is right behind them. And the Chicago teachers, which was 100% funded at the turn of the century, is now under 50% funded. And I could go on and on. You know where this goes. It goes to a dark place where people are going to get hurt. Because when every system in your state is a Ponzi scheme, every single system, and that's what Illinois is, what happens? What happens when Ponzi schemes are exposed? Has anybody seen the Bernie Madoff story? What happens is everybody gets hurt, and some people get hurt more than others. And that's what's going to happen. If you we don't take evasive action at every level. If we don't level with people about where we truly stand, and by the way, we focus on Chicago, we focus on Illinois. There's a contagion, Ed Backrack, who I think I saw in the audience, he'll tell you, there's a contagion of police and fire pension funds at the municipal level all over this state. Don't tell me you respect police officers and firefighters or teachers or state workers or municipal workers when you lie to them about how you are or are not providing for their retirement. They're holding up their end. We, as a political class, are not holding up our end. And they're the good guys? And the message to public sector unions If you don't like being lied to, rank and file, because the leadership is just like the politicians. If you don't like being lied to, then tell the leadership of AFSCME and SEIU and the teachers unions to stop financing liars, because that's what they've been doing for 40 years.
Anybody unclear on that? Table 13, I think you were having some coffee or something. Okay. Dan, how's your, where's the helicopter right now? Is it coming in, or you got a second? All right. I'm going to try and get through some of these real quick. Sheila Weinberg, City Club member, head of Truth in Accounting, asks, she read the state Constitution one time. She saw a balanced budget requirement. Is that right? And then she looked in the newspaper and saw a $200 billion hole in our finances. And she wonders if you could square that for her.
Right. As I said, I believe in all the provisions of the state Constitution, even the ones improperly interpreted by the Supreme Court. And that includes the primary funder of K-12 education. It also includes balanced budget. That actually contemplates your obligations in real time, fiscal year over fiscal year, as opposed to what we do now, which is this, Enron accounting. In fact, our situation is more dire than Enron. We just have the power to tax. That's what salvages us for now. But it really is, it speaks to something that's a real problem in Illinois. And it's a problem kind of in our political culture locally, nationally, is that we're no longer, we no longer have a society where the rule of law is enforced. We have the rule of men and women. It says, well, why do we get to ignore that provision of the Constitution? Because Mike Madigan says so. John Cullerton says so. And Jim Durkin says so. And Bill Brady says so. And they all go along with it. That's why. Well, that's not a very good way to run or to organize a free society. In fact, that's one of the ways you turn a free society into not such a free society, is you replace the rule of law with the rule of men and women. And that's what we're doing here. And we're doing it with the men and women of always. So there are elections in March of 2018, and there are elections in November of 2018. As I said before, if you think that it's been a long enough time with this experiment of Chicago Democrat dominance of state government, and, oh, by the way, then there's another election in February of 2019, and the men and tiny dancers of always in city government, then there's an opportunity to do something different. And if you don't, but my state rep is so great. But I like it. We go to the PTA together. She's fun. He's great. We coached together on the football team. If you think that's the criteria to decide who should be representing your interests in Springfield, then we will continue to get the government we deserve. So I guess it's kind of up to all of us to decide what exactly the government we deserve looks like, because we're going to get it. And the question is, do we get it good and hard?
Do we think you should talk on the radio? Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Proft. Thank you. Hold on, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere.
Next, from Springfield, Republican House members Grant Worley, Mark Batnick, and Keith Wheeler hold a press conference to discuss their bill that would amend the State Officials and Employee Ethics Act in order to combat sexual harassment and other ethical issues in the office. This runs about 15 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here today. So in the news recently have been several issues with sexual harassment under the dome here in Springfield. And I'd first like to thank leadership for bringing forward the legislation that adds sexual harassment to the Legislative Inspector General's duties. There's been discussion of extending the one-year moratorium, that timeline, so we applaud those efforts as well. And also appointing, after much delay, a Legislative Inspector General. So some positive steps have been taken, but unfortunately they don't go nearly far enough, which is why we have introduced House Bill 4151. Right now there's a task force that's being formed to help address some of these issues, some of these concerns, but those in Springfield have tendency to take too long. There are some immediate steps that we can do right now to cure some of these concerns. A resolution was passed out of a pensions committee this morning. Once again, resolutions are not law, and we need to clearly strengthen our legislative ethics laws. So what House Bill 4151 does is a number of things. First off, it incorporates the suggestions made by departing Legislative Inspector General Homer in a letter dated April 15th of 2014. It strengthens the conflict of interest provisions. It requires more comprehensive annual financial statements of economic interest to mirror those that judges are required to do. It adds censure and an administrative penalty for any violations of these up to $25,000 under current Illinois law. When it is actually a law that is being violated, it's only a $5,000 fine. So this ups it to $25,000. A more unique proposal here under 4151 is how we appoint the Legislative Ethics Commission. Right now, it is a leadership-driven initiative. They appoint 2 members from each caucus in each chamber. If you look at who's currently serving on that, they are typically members of leadership from those caucuses. What House Bill 4151 would do is it would remove leadership from that process. It would make it closely resemble a grand jury or a jury in a normal court of law to where people are randomly selected. So each caucus would have 2 members selected to serve for a total of 8 for a total of 60 days. They would be required to adjudicate any complaints within those 60 days, and then a new Legislative Ethics Commission would be seated. So therefore, we're getting a rolling membership in Legislative Ethics Commission for oversight. It's about as close as we can get to peer review without bias. Right now, there is, whether a perceived or real, a tendency to protect membership and sort of discount or put a chilling effect on anyone who's willing to step forward with an ethics complaint. We need to change that and make sure that the complainant has the rights that they are entitled to fairly address their concerns. Another thing it does is for the members, or for the Legislative Inspector General, it renames it. That's a technical thing in nature, but it also removes the requirement that they have state, county, or local jurisdictional experience and makes it simply federal. Once again, there are highly ethical people that serve in all levels of government in Illinois, but we have this appearance of conflict here. And if we can remove that by getting people with federal experience appointed, it takes any political process or potential political process, it removes it, it diminishes it. It also adds posting requirements. So in everyone's area of employment, there's normally things posted for employment, such as what your rights are under the Fair Labor Practices Act, things like that, hours required, things like that. This would put there a posting requirement, how to file an ethics complaint and whom you file an ethics complaint with. It's important that we make this process as easy and as transparent as possible for any state employee to go ahead and file an ethics complaint. Anything to add?
I'll add some briefly. I'm certainly supportive of the bill and many of the other things that are coming up right now. But I want to say that this isn't just about sexual harassment. I think if I could walk away with one thing from this is that the lack of accountability on all levels in this building is stunning, whether it be the way we spend our money, sexual harassment, ethics, campaign finance. The lack of accountability is absolutely stunning.
So with that, we'll open it up to any questions.
Why do you think the IG post was vacant for all these years?
I can only speculate on that. I believe, I have my own personal beliefs on that, but why they actually didn't go through the process, I don't know. I can say that I know members of the House Republican caucus did offer up several names to fill that vacancy. Why the other caucuses didn't, I can't speak to what they did, but I do know that our membership did offer names in trying to get that vacancy filled.
Do you think with even the letter from Homer mentions the Metra scandal from 2014, that seems to be about the time that we stopped having oversight, right?
I would say that good investigative journalists such as yourself might be able to put that connection together.
Explain a bit more about the 60-day
right.
issue here and bringing in a kind of a rotating...
So right now, these 26, 27 complaints, whatever the number may be, or any complaint, has just been sitting literally on a desk or in a binder somewhere with no response to it. We want to get this process as fair and transparent as possible. And right now, when you have 8 members permanently assigned to this that are predominantly from leadership, if not all are from leadership, we need to change that. That puts a chilling effect on anyone that's going to bring forward a complaint. They need to, the person, the victim, the person making the complaint needs to have the clearest and most ethical path for their issue to be resolved. And so by putting these members in on a 60-day rotating basis, it takes that element away of well, I know if I'm going to complain, I'm just complaining to leadership, and where's that going to go? Or there could be repercussions. I mean, we have slapback laws and things like that, but that still puts a chilling component over any victim, and we need to remove that. They need to have a path that's transparent, fair, and is going to be adjudicated as efficiently and lawfully as possible.
So, I mean, essentially you're saying those who make complaints, should they be updated on where their complaint is? Because we heard, recently last week with the sexual harassment allegations, those were filed like a year ago, and the individual didn't hear anything about it.
Correct. So they absolutely do, and that's where I do applaud the appointment of a legislative, it's temporary legislative inspector general, so hopefully that's one of the things that she accomplishes post haste, but they should get an update. And we do not know what the subject matter of those complaints are. It could be sexual harassment, it could be campaigning on state time, it could be any number of things, but they still deserve a prompt response. And for them to just languish, some for years, is completely inexcusable.
So, President Benning, what you say how long have you been in, and when you say that the level of accountability here is basically abysmal, give us some examples that kind of
Sure. I was in, I'm on the Audit Commission. I've been in 2.5 years, Mark Batnick, 97th District. I've been on the Audit Commission now, I think I just had my 4th hearing. And at the last hearing, we had an audit of NRI. Now, this wasn't an audit of NRI Part 1 that had massive scandals. So you had NRI Part 1 with all the scandals, and I believe it was the Violence Prevention Association or Authority that handled the money from NRI for that. Big scandals. They move it to ICJA, Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. So this is a hot potato. They take that money and they, okay, we move it over here. The previous administration directed ICJA not to follow their own federal regulations when giving out grant money. Lo and behold, again, there's massive scandals. And it's being conflated into one as if this new audit is part of the old audit. It's not. And if you look at the people who are on the board of directors at ICJA, I mean, it's a who of among Illinois politics. And when I'm on the Audit Commission, I have somebody come in. I'm getting the same repeat thing here in Audit Commission. It's like, oh, it was the old director. Holy cow, it was bad. They fall on the sword. We're going to do this, this, and that. And then I look up the old director's name. They're somewhere else in government. So today, so that was last veto session. Today, this morning, I'm in Audit Commission, and I find out that there's a law that requires us to do a report on the effectiveness of EDGE credits annually. We haven't done one of those reports since 2005. And I've been somebody that's been critical of the previous EDGE program. It would have been nice over the last 10 years to know whether all the money that we gave to all those corporations was worth it. So it's things like that. And we've heard other stories about campaign finance, questionable things, and it just, everywhere I turn around, I seem to be shocked at the lack of accountability. And those are just some small examples. And then, lastly, just accountability, the way we do our jobs up there, the way the tax dollars are spent. The processes that bills are passed, how many bills are gotten replaced, and you got a bill that's this thick that's plopped on your desk with a couple hours to review. I don't think any of those things are good government accountability measures. So I hope that answers your question clearly enough.
It shines a light on a lot that people wouldn't know. How would this legislation address it? Would it address it, in your view, marginally, totally?
Sure. I think I don't think everything can be addressed in Representative Worley's legislation, but Representative Worley's legislation does address more than just the sexual harassment component. It addresses everything about the Inspector General's position. And then just the fact, there's your accountability. We haven't had an inspector general for a couple of years. So I think all those things combined are a start. And I'm kind of hoping that this has a little bit of a snowball effect, that this leads to something else and some other things. So this affects a lot. It doesn't affect everything that I'm referring to, but it certainly affects quite a bit of it.
Have either of you seen any kind of, instances of harassment? Have you seen any ethical violations? Can you provide examples of that? And maybe also, when it comes to harassment, what are you guys going to do individually, within your offices, with your staffers, with your colleagues, to call out such behavior?
Sure. I'm gonna answer it as best I can. I have not seen anything myself firsthand, and this whole thing made me kind of think of what my own code should be. And I think if I did see something firsthand, it needs to be reported. If you see something secondhand, it needs to, the person, if somebody tells you something that happened to them, so you're getting it secondhand, those people should be encouraged to report it, and you should help them in any way you can. If you get something thirdhand, at that point it's kind of a rumor, and I'm not sure, what you can do at that level. But I've kind of put in my own little protocol of what I'm going to follow in terms of dealing with those specific situations. Yeah.
So I, too, have not firsthand seen anything. I'm one of those individuals that decides not to really stay on campus too much during the evening for just these reasons. Springfield has a well-earned reputation, so I am not out in that environment where most of these sexual harassment in nature are more prevalent. As far as what we are going to do forward, it's continue to do things like this. Wherever we see unethical behavior, and this, to be honest with you, the fact that this office was vacant I was dumbfounded by. When I first learned of it. So whether we're talking about the criminal investigation of our Auditor General, or this lapse here in oversight, or the ethics or the Audit Commission, is we need to continue to ask all of you to bring these things to light. Springfield desperately needs to be cleaned up, and right now we don't know what we don't know, but every time we learn something, we're going to try to collectively seek a cure for it.
Yeah, to answer your question, no, I've not seen anything firsthand myself. The lack of thought that goes into what we do here, the knee-jerk reactions that occur, seem to be our response to almost everything. And we get into these kind of crisis situations like now, and all of a sudden the speaker delivers a bill. I would like to see us take a more thoughtful process on most of these things. I think filing a bill like this, which may not go anywhere this week, it probably won't. But it does give us a chance to talk about what's happening in a way from a different perspective that we can collaborate on into future processes that will make something that would be more comprehensive, more concrete, maybe incorporate some best practices from other places, what other states have done. I would like to take that and then use that as a model for how I'd handle things in my own office and in my own business, frankly. So that's where I'm looking to get to.
And then finally, the legislation that's proposed here, the thought of doing annual training, is that necessary shouldn't grown adults know what sexual harassment looks like?
I'll step on that landmine real quick. They should. I think there also tends to be some gray areas where one of the things that I think that has come to light is some people don't realize the influence of the power of their position, and that needs to be looked at in a different way than just what kind of normally happens. So I think it is a little bit different for legislators than just good behavior, and it's a good conversation for us to have, and I'm looking forward to the training.
If I may. In a previous lifetime, I used to teach people how to fly, and I know you're not going to learn something correctly the first time every time. And it's also a generational thing, to where people that may have grown up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s see things a little bit differently than those that might be a little bit more younger in the age scale. So refreshing training on pretty much anything is a good idea. I have no problems with annual training or things like that. But with that, we are in session, so we need to get upstairs. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, from Springfield, State Representative David Harris is joined by members of the National Press Association as they announce a resolution asking for community members to help them find photos of the 58,000 Vietnam vets killed in service, as many of these photos and personal records had previously been destroyed in a St. Louis warehouse fire. This runs about 15 minutes.
All
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is David Harris. I serve the 53rd District of the General Assembly. And we're here this morning because of a resolution that I introduced and has co-sponsorship with the chairperson of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Representative Chapellavia. Unfortunately, she had planned to be here today, but she is chairing another committee right now and cannot be here. But I wanted to draw attention to House Resolution 530. House Resolution 530 is an initiative that was brought to me by the Illinois Press Association in conjunction with the National Press Association to obtain photographs for individuals whose photographic record has been lost, individuals whose names are inscribed on the Vietnam Veterans Wall Memorial in Washington, D.C. The basic background is this. As you know, there are more than 58,000 names on the wall. Back in 1973 at the Army Personnel Center in St. Louis, there was a serious fire. Many personnel records were lost. With those personnel records were photographic records of the individuals, many of whom were who had names on the wall. There were as many as 24,000 individuals, soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, whose photographs were lost. And the initiative was made to try to locate a photograph of each of those, an initiative by the National Press Association and then picked up around the United States. As I understand it, and you'll hear from Mr. Johnson in a moment, as I understand it, that 24,000 is now down to about 4,500 or so. Of that 4,500, you'll hear that there are about 350 still from Illinois for whom we have no photographic records. So House Resolution is an encouragement for the communities around the state of Illinois and individuals to make contact with in any way they can to try to get a photographic record of every name on the wall in Washington, D.C. I'm going to introduce Mr. Johnson from the National Press Association. Mr. Johnson is a Gold Star parent, and you probably know what a Gold Star parent is, meaning that he lost a son in Afghanistan. As you know, I personally am a veteran, as is Chairman Chapellavia and many members of the Veterans Affairs Committee. We owe a lot to those people, those soldiers, sailors, airmen and Marines, Coast Guard as well, that have served so honorably. But this keys in specifically on the Vietnam veterans and those Vietnam veterans who have given their all and have their name on the wall. So let me turn it over, if I may, to Mr. Johnson, and he can make some remarks.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here today. I had a statement I was going to read from the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which I'll read part of it because I don't want to take too much of your time. I think instead I'm going to talk from my heart to you. Like David said, I'm a Gold Star dad. My son, First Lieutenant David Johnson, was killed in Afghanistan, so I certainly have an idea of what it means to lose somebody, whether they're from Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, or World War II. A loss is a loss. I'm going to read a brief statement from Tim Teets, and I'll only read parts of it, and then I'll talk about why I'm here today to support this bill. In 1979, a group of Vietnam veterans established the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Their vision, a memorial to those who served and sacrificed during our nation's longest war. Their product, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, became an iconic symbol by which we honor and remember those who served and sacrificed. Yet, despite the permanent inscription, as the years have passed, we have begun to forget the faces behind those names. In 2009, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund recognized this reality. They realized that among the 5 million visitors to the wall, which, by the way, is one of the most visited sites in Washington, D.C., visitors who just come and visit, more than half weren't alive in 1982 when it was dedicated. So to accomplish this, they created what's called the Wall of Faces. They want to match a face or a picture with every name that is on the wall. For the past 8 years, organizations, companies, and many newspapers, that's why the IPA here is involved, from around the country have toiled innumerable hours gathering photographs of these lost service members. As of yesterday, all of those names on the wall of faces, there's less than 4,400 that we have to find. When I joined the project 3 years ago, we were missing 25,000 of them. So we have made a lot of progress in the last 36 months. Half of the states have found all their photos. And I'm going off script for a minute. When I met with public television people and public radio 3 years ago, there's only one state that was found. I believe it was Utah. They told me that I was crazy to think that we would find all of these pictures. They said it's an impossible task for you to do this. They laughed at me. I said, we're going to find all. This is when I started with Wisconsin. I said, we're going to find them all by next Memorial Day. And we did. We found them all. We were missing at that time about 450 in Wisconsin. So in Illinois here, we're starting at a number of 346. We're really to find the last one. So it is definitely possible. As we close in on this full accounting, our focus has turned, the Vietnam Veteran Law has turned to Illinois. Illinois is has the biggest losses of all the states, and now attention from Washington is on Illinois. With the passage of House Resolution 530, leaders like Representative David Harris, we can make certain that Illinois sons are recognized. Hundreds of thousands of Illinois sons and daughters served in Vietnam. Among over the 58,000, this is 2,938 made the ultimate sacrifice and are listed on the wall in Washington, D.C. They're from Illinois. These men and women deserve to be honored one more time. They deserve to be seen for the young men and women they are. We need to see them with their smiles, their skinny ties, their awkward poses. To accomplish this need, we need to find these 346 photos of these Illinois fallen. The 100th session of the Illinois legislature will accomplish much. We may not know what it will be most remembered for this legislature, but the passage of Resolution 580 will make certain that we never forget the service and sacrifice of the heroes from Vietnam. So Vietnam Veteran Memorial, and the last statement says, thank you for your support, and I urge you to pass this resolution as one small measure of commitment to our fallen heroes. On a personal note, there will be no memorial for the current soldiers in Washington until 10 years after the war. That's a rule, a congressional rule. And so the Vietnam Veterans Memorial people, and this is what I want to explain just briefly, were very kind to me. A lot of people that fought in Vietnam were very kind to me. The minute my son was killed, shortly after, Vietnam people from that war loved me and took care of me until the day my son was buried at Arlington. When I learned that the guys needed some help, they needed to find pictures of fallen soldiers, and I'm a newspaper publisher. My dad was a newspaper publisher for 35 years in Northern Illinois, and he had lent me the money. I bought a small paper in Wisconsin, and I realized that this would be pretty easy for newspapers to find these. Community newspapers could find these guys. And so what we did is we were missing, starting in Wisconsin, we were missing 450. So what we did is we got the list from the association, and we said, okay, there's 17 in Green Bay. There's 9 in Appleton. There's 1 in Marshfield. And we told these little newspapers, the people, the little hometown papers, this is the guys we're looking for. And we found all of them, but 64 within about 6 or 7 months. We found them very fast. And so the same thing, I went to the IPA here in Illinois. I said, employ your little newspapers and your big newspapers, including the Chicago Tribune, has been very supportive of this effort. Let's find these guys in their hometowns, the pictures. Someone must have a picture of them, family, relative, friend. And then at the end, it gets hard. We use investigative reporters from journalism schools to help find the last ones. And they are hard to find sometimes, because sometimes they sign their paper. Maybe they've said they're from Chicago, Illinois, but really they're from Arkansas or Missouri. But we can track them down and find them. We owe it to them. These pictures will be displayed on an education center. And I'd like to I brought a picture. These are uploaded on a website. Okay. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial has a website, vvm.org. And when these pictures are uploaded, and people can upload them themselves, they are displayed online on their birthday, and they do it on their birthday because some battles were so horrific that they couldn't do it by date of death. So they do it by their birthday, and so they're immediately online. And then this is the education center that will be built near the wall in 2019. These the Vietnam veterans knew that the Afghan and Iraqi fallen heroes, I think there's about 6,000 of them, they would not have a memorial in Washington until 10 years after the war, so they are going to be the temporary memorial for all the current soldiers that have been killed. I don't know how many from Illinois, but I suppose you have quite a bit of losses like we do here in other states.
And so they said, hey, we need some help. And so, of course, I would help them in any way I could. A face is a lot different than just a name on a wall. A face shows the character of somebody. It shows their life, and especially when you see their eyes and you see somebody. It's different than just a name on a wall. I think the very least we can do on this week of Veterans Day to honor our fallen military here in Illinois. Let's help find these. Let's support this resolution. Let's find these pictures, and we can do it. We only have really not 346. There's 3 were found over the weekend, and I think we can do it. And I strongly urge you to support this bill and support this effort. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, thank you very much. And obviously our sympathies go out to you continually because of the loss of your son. My son also served in Afghanistan and was fortunate enough to come back. I'd like to introduce Mr. Gaylor from the Illinois Press Association. And the fact that we're down to 346 in Illinois versus 349 and 3 were found over the weekend shows you the ongoing, continuing nature of the effort. So, Mr. Gaylor, if you would.
Thank you, Representative Harris. I'm John Gaylor, publisher of the newspaper in Hillsborough, the Journal News, and I'm also on the Illinois Press Association Board and the National Newspaper Association Board. And I was with Andrew a couple of years ago in Washington when he challenged us to use our local community papers to find these faces for the wall, to identify, to get a personal recognition of the soldiers and sailors and airmen that have gone that are listed on that wall. And I took up the challenge, ran a column on Memorial Day that year in our paper, and I think we had 6 or 7 missing from Montgomery County at that time, and the phone calls that came in were just incredible. And probably within 6 months we had them all, but it was just so amazing that you just put the word out, and people know, almost everybody has some association with the name on that wall. Their family members, or an uncle, or an aunt, or a friend of the family, everybody's associated in somewhere. So it really does work, and I can't thank you enough, Representative Harris, for making this aware, so we can finish up the 300 more names here in Illinois and get everybody listening and give them the credit and the honor that they so deserve for the sacrifices they've made. It's really fitting at this time, especially with Memorial Day coming up this Saturday, or not Memorial Day, excuse me, Veterans Day coming up this Saturday, that we do it at this time and that we make an effort to really put the word out so that we can get all these guys and gals faces identified and listed. Thank you again.
Gentlemen, thank you, and I think the effort is one, I think, a worthwhile, important effort. As you can see, it's making significant progress, starting with 25,000 names, down to less than 4,400. I think we had 700 or more in Illinois, and we're down now to half of that. So that's the initiative. I think that it's going to receive very positive response. I'm delighted to have the newspapers in Illinois backing this and supporting it, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
If I am listening or watching or reading about this, what can I do? What should I do?
You can.
Come on, step up.
Okay. If you don't, if you wanted to find out who is missing from your community, you can go to the Vietnam Veteran Memorial Fund website, which is vvmf.org. You can go under Faces Project, go to Advanced Search, put your county in there, and it'll tell you which it'll list them all of them, and it'll show you. And then there's a symbol like this, or you'll see a missing symbol for the ones that they don't have pictures. It'll be very obvious to you which they can. And the search tool is awesome, so that you can find out if there's any missing from your county.
Well, hey, they need Cousin Fred. I've got a picture of Cousin Fred.
Well, if you get the picture, you can either upload it yourself. There's specific directions online, or you can submit it to the Illinois Press Association, or you can call the Vietnam Veterans in Washington, and they will help you get that. But we have newspapers throughout the state that can just scan it and do it for you if you don't have a scanner.
Or make contact with if it's a local newspaper.
Yep.
Make contact with a local newspaper, and they'll certainly help track it down.
And they'll work with the IPA, and the IPA Absolutely. Can get it to Washington.
When is this? Is this a new memorial that's going to be built adjacent to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial? And as long as I'm asking,
yes,
is it going to be just static photos, or if somebody wanted to have multimedia, like a mother talking about remembering their son or uncle or something like that?
I don't know the answer to the multimedia, but I suspect that you could do that. There's no limit on space on the Vietnam Memorial site. When you upload a picture, it can be more than one picture. There's never been a limit. You could upload 10 pictures or 20 pictures. I suspect with the donations we have, or the donors we have, they will ensure that we have unlimited space. So I don't think that's a problem. And what was your first question again? I'm sorry. It was about the location of the education center.
Do we know when?
Yes,
well,
yes.
I
Yeah,
think
the
it's
plans
adjacent to the
yes,
Vietnam
yes, it is.
Veterans
It's in a
Memorial.
soccer field right near it, and Congress has approved the full plans. Fundraising is going pretty good. I think they raised over $35 million for it. It's going to be about a $100 million goal. A goal is to break ground in 2019. It will be underground like a bunker in Vietnam, and also so it doesn't hinder the landscape of that area. But all the plans are approved, and it's good to go, and it will be right near the wall.
And is it going to then also have subsequently the photos of Afghan soldiers?
For a period of time, it will have the Afghan and Iraqi soldiers displayed, only because there's not going to be a memorial for them. But once there is a memorial, and who knows when that's going to be, and that cannot occur until 10 years after Congress and the President declared that the war is over. So it might even not even happen in my lifetime. And so until that time, the Vietnam veterans said they know how important it is to have a memorial for the fallen, and so they are going to temporarily do it. When I say temporarily, it could be decades, or it could be a very long time.
Any other questions from anyone? Thank you very much for being here, and I'm actually very honored to sponsor the resolution, and happy to have as co-sponsors all the members of the Veterans Affairs Committee. My thanks to the National Press Association and the Illinois Press Association for their efforts on this. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel. When we happen to think of going out to visit some wineries, often we're thinking of places like California. But increasingly, wineries are a big part of the economy of Southern Illinois. And one of the most impressive of those, and newest, is a place called Walker's Bluff. Let's go take a look. Walker's Bluff Resort is located in Carterville, Illinois, where it is situated on over 300 acres. It started off modestly on the land that once belonged to the owner's grandfather, and over the last 10 years has grown into one of the most incredible wineries anywhere in the United States. Visitors now come from all over the United States and around the world.
This holds basically 3 tons of Cabernet Franc grape after it's been pressed into wine. It'll stay here for 3 days. We will rack it off. Basically what happens is the yeast settles out to the bottom. So we'll take this next stage of wine into a clean vat. We'll do that a few times, and by then it'll be ready to start to filter and to age for a long period of time. These will age up to 18 months to 2 years in oak barrels. We use Missouri oak barrels from Cuba, Missouri. And after that 2-year process, we'll bring it out, filter it, bottle it, and have it for sale. And then the vats behind us, we have 1,650 gallons of Symphony in the far one. The one right behind you is 660 gallons of Chardonnay. The smaller one is 500 gallons of Concord.
When taking a tour of the facilities, one can hear how the wine is made, as well as take a tour of the vast portion of the winery located underground. Here there is a massive wine tasting room and space where hundreds can gather to attend a function or hold a wedding. In addition to the massive wine tasting room and winery, where one can get a light lunch, there is also a world-class restaurant next door called The Legends.
So we have 125-person capacity in this venue right here. We can service more depending on whether it's a sit-down meal or it's a buffet-style meal. So it really holds a lot. It can also extend out onto the balcony, which allows us more space for a larger crowd. We also have a concert venue just outside the doors here, which allows us to host even more.
Many like to go to Walker's Bluff and just go to the general store, which is the gateway to the 300 acres of vineyards, wineries, and restaurants. At the general store, visitors can also sample wine, order a light meal, and shop among the vast array of food items, crafts, and holiday decorations.
We're a unique venue. We have unique merchandise. We have a wonderful team here of people, and I feel it's a place you can't get anywhere else. The merchandise that we do have in the store, we try to have local vendors, and we try to keep it as community related as we can.
Already the owners of Walker's Bluff have invested tens of millions of dollars, not only creating construction jobs, but continuing to add permanent employment in an area of the state that has frequently had some of the highest unemployment in Illinois. But the owners of Walker's Bluff are not done yet.
Absolutely, we're not done. There's still so much in the future for Walker's Bluff. We have plans to break ground on our Walker's Bluff Resort, which will bring so much commerce and have so much economic impact on our region. Last year alone, we turned away 200 national convention opportunities to bring business to this area, which would help communities surrounding us. Those individuals that come would shop in restaurants and stores, not just on our property, but all over the region. And we're not able to service them because we have not enough rooms or enough space in a convention center to host them all. It would really help our region as a whole.
Walker's Bluff is not merely a story of a magnificent winery. It is also the story of economic development for a part of the state that desperately needs to diversify its economy. The owners are now asking the state to grant them a gaming license, which would allow them to open a casino in an effort to further develop into a full-scale resort and conference center. The plan calls for building hotels with over 300 rooms, a year-round water park, a convention center, an entertainment center, as well as having a spa and the casino.
So with the 4,000 to 5,000 conferences that take place here in the Midwest, we think we're positioned in a great place so that we can draw those groups in. Obviously, every time someone spends the night here in Southern Illinois, they're going to spend money and they're going to eat at the restaurants and so on. So we see this as an opportunity also for our skilled craftsmen to build a large project coming up in the future.
A feasibility study says this would create over 1,200 construction jobs and add over 700 permanent jobs at the resort. With the casino and hotels, the resort would no longer have to turn away millions of dollars in potential business. And that could make this economically challenged region of Illinois a destination stop for tourists and businesses for decades to come.
Next, from Springfield, we talked to Cynthia Bunch, the owner and partner of the Walker's Bluff Vineyard in Carterville. Mrs. Bunch talks to us about the features of her vineyard and her reason for being at the state capitol, which is to talk to legislators about the challenges of receiving a gaming license in Illinois. This runs about 10 minutes.
Cynthia Bunch, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. And I will tell the viewers I recently had an opportunity to visit your winery and development in Southern Illinois. It's in Carterville, which is not too far from Carbondale, which people might be more familiar with. Tell us, what would Walker's Bluff offer people, and how long has it been around, and how did you get started with the idea to build a winery?
Well, we started in 2007. I inherited the property from my great-grandmother and grandfather, and my husband wanted to start a little vineyard, and we began planting some grapes at the end of the road, and every Sunday we had hundreds of cars coming down to see what we were doing. And we have a park-like atmosphere there. I asked my husband, I said, you know, I'm out there picking up trash. I'm like, what do we do? And he said, put a gate up and charge admission. And that's how it began in 2007. 2009, we opened the Legends Restaurant, and we have been booked with a wedding almost every weekend since. It's just, as you know, it's picturesque, and everybody wants to come there. It's very serene, and people want to come. We have fabulous wine, Illinois wine. We've grown our own grapes and have a great winemaker who makes fabulous wine, and the entertainment is just A1.
It's funny because I've heard over the years a number of enterprises where people almost back into them, and it sounds that's what you did. It wasn't like you had a grand scheme and a 5-year plan. You just gonna happen.
We just planned to start a little area of agribusiness. And my uncle, who lived on the property, had been let go from a trucking company that had been purchased by a large company. He was making $28 an hour, and they cut him down to $8.50 an hour. So he came and said, "I need a job," and he was a good farmer. So we started building Walker's Bluff.
And I would say, having just recently been there, it's tucked away. It's not like sitting right on the road. You almost got to know where you're going. But it's really magnificent when you drive into the property. You have what? How many acres altogether?
370 acres. And I acquired 160, and then now we have purchased others onto it because of the development we intend to put in.
I would say I have had the pleasure to go to wineries out in Sonoma, California, and others around Illinois. Yours really is, and I wouldn't say this, is really maybe the most magnificent that I've been to in terms of the construction that you've done, the underground facilities. How did you come up with that concept, and how long did that all take?
You know, I was a nurse in the coal mines to begin with, and so the coal industry actually helped us to put in the cave because it was soft dirt there. It wasn't, the caves out in California are actually done in granite and hard rock, where we actually used, coal miners came and put the underpinning in, and we sprayed the walls and made the caves. And having an engineer husband also helps because he has his little mind going all the time on stuff.
So right now you have a general store, you have the tasting room, which is a fantastic bar area. People can take a tour of the winery. They have the underground. You have a huge tasting room down there that's been developed. And I understand you even have weddings down below.
Yes, we do. We have, they call it the cave, and they have weddings that go into the cave, or they can actually use the tasting room as well, just to do their reception in, and or they'll do I think they call it the Enchanted Forest, which those weddings are beautiful out there, especially this 2 weeks ago when the fall leaves were falling. It was stunning.
Yeah, so they can, as you say, go out and have a wedding in the woods. Yes. With the leaves falling and all.
Or in the vineyard. We've had lots of brides that want to be in the vineyard as well.
And of course, people will remember this past summer we had the total eclipse of the sun, and we're going to have another one coming up in southern Illinois in about 7 or 8 years, I think. You had one of the fantastic. Tell us about what you had going on for the total eclipse this summer.
Okay, we had Moonstock, and that will be an annual event for us, where we will always have something, whether or not we have an eclipse or not. Again, in 2024, April 2024, there will be another total eclipse, and we'll do a huge event. But each year between now and then, we intend to do some type of entertainment and do a festival.
How many people came this past summer, do you know?
17,000. Yeah.
And it goes to show, because you have that much land, and that's one of the things that's different about your winery and area. You have so much land, it gives you the latitude of doing these really massive, 17,000 massive events where you had, bands for 3 days playing?
Yes, we had 31 bands over 3 days. We had camping, had over 1,000 people that camped. It was amazing to me. In the 3 days, we did not have one issue of any type of arguments, fights, anything. It was really a truly Woodstock type moment without the rain, thank God.
Well, having said that, let's transition a little bit to what brings you to the state capitol and what are your future plans for this, because you're already having an economic impact in the area with the people that come to visit, but you want to do a lot more. Is that right?
Absolutely. Our intention is to build a 300-room facility with 2 hotels, 35,000 square foot conference and convention facility, and gaming. And why we are back in Springfield again, we've been trying this for 5 years to get this off the ground. 3 years ago, we had hoped that we would have gotten the okay, and we're still
for a gaming license.
For a gaming license. Wasn't our choice to do gaming, but in order to get the convention business on an RFP standpoint, people that go to conventions want to have gaming. That's the second thing that they're checking off after the nice hotel.
And I understand because people have heard about your location, you've had a number of conferences call and try to book there, but you've had to turn them down because you don't yet have all the facilities.
We don't have the hotel and all of the facilities yet. We can do, and we make do, and thankfully the people are very willing to accommodate what we can accommodate, and we'll set up with the local hotels. We've got a nice business partnership with the other hotels, and we have a trolley that can go get folks, and people will drive, but it'll be better when everything is on one location.
So as you say, you want to build the hotels with 300 plus rooms, let's say. You want to have a conference center for meeting areas, a spa, an entertainment center, some more, and a water, 24 hours a year round, right?
12 months out of the year, water park, yes. Indoor, outdoor.
And so you're going for a gaming. Now, the other thing is, a lot of these, would I be right to say, some of these conferences are maybe relatively close, but they might be people coming in from St. Louis or maybe even from some other, state much further away. So it's one of the challenges for getting the gaming license. What arguments or challenges are you hearing when you say people give you kind of pushback on your effort to get a gaming license?
Actually, we really haven't had any real pushback. The SB 7 has passed, so now we're waiting for it to be called. That is our biggest. We can't figure out why it isn't being called in the House.
Those who don't know, what's SB 7?
SB 7 is Senate Bill 7, and it was Walker's Bluff was included in the gaming bill, and it included 4 other facilities throughout the state that would hugely impact everywhere. It would hugely impact development and growth for the areas.
And so you're pushing for legislation to get this license, but what are the pieces of legislation that you need to have passed?
I need Senate Bill 7 to go on to the House and be passed and then signed by the governor. Senate Bill 7 includes 6 total licenses for facilities throughout the state.
And I understand you've had some projections, you've worked with economic development projections on what it would mean in terms of dollars coming into that area. And again, this is an area of the state, while it's beautiful, it's also frequently had some of the highest unemployment in the state. Economically, what would it mean, according to your projections, for that region of the state?
It would be initially it would be over 1,000 construction jobs, $40 million just in construction paychecks for the area. Once it is ongoing, then we would have over 800 full-time employees, and the economic projections is over $62 million. Just our facility, not all of the other impact. People stopping to get gas, eating breakfast at the Sunnyside Cafe or wherever, and just coming to the area. It would mean a huge. It's the pin that changes everything for Southern Illinois. And it improves everything, all of the school districts, the numbers of employees that we would have to recruit to come in because there are not enough folks there, so we would have to bring some in. That would make a boom for the housing market. Everything changes with this. Last Wednesday we had 29 of the large stakeholders that came. Every mayor from the area came, every representative and every senator was there. And just hearing the stories of what this will mean, even from little towns like Cesar, Illinois, north of us, it's 2,000 people. The mayor, Jason Ashmore, was talking about the huge impact that it would have on his constituents that live in these sleepy little towns that have been left when the coal mines closed up. It would change the way that those folks can live.
And if you get the gaming license, on what kind of a timeline would all of this development happen?
The day I get it, the bulldozers come in. We're already 2 years behind. We should be cutting a ribbon in January of opening. So we have a 2 to 5 year plan on how it would be finished out.
Well, it's a lovely area, and so far everything you've done is also very tasteful. It's very impressive, and I think the pictures of the story of our visit there would tell its own, convince people. Thank you for joining us. Maybe we can follow up with you again.
Great. Good to be here.